So welcome everybody to number 6 of the Fall PD series. You have a bit.ly there where you can access all of the presentations that we've had during this series. I am Ivanna Mann Thrower Anderson, one of the ESL Title III team. You can see on the screen Christy Day, who is our section chief and now our division director, Marshall Foster, Susan Waltz, and the great Sally Stocks. Say hi.
Thank you everyone for joining us. I know some of you were participated in another webinar with WIDA, so we are really grateful that you're with us. And we're going to hear about Ivanna. She's our SIOP queen, so we're really excited that she's going to share all that passion and expertise about this model with us today.
Awesome. So I am Ivanna Mann Thrower Anderson, one of the ESL Title III team, and I'm excited to be here with you today. Zetley called me the SIOP queen. I came out of Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, where I was the first ever full-time paid SIOP coach in the world, as far as we know. And I did grab that title, SIOP queen, at that time. But Zetley, oh my gosh, lately, Zetley has been quite the SIOP, what do we call her? What do you want to be? You just want to be a queen of a different kingdom? Queen of a different kingdom?
No.
Zetley's done some amazing things with SIOP as well, and so I'm counting on her jumping in during this presentation. So today we are looking at instructional supports through SIOP, and you'll find when we get to our goals that part of the goal is to look at what can we do face-to-face and what can we do online. So a quick welcome, which you've just heard most of. We're going to look quickly at the webinar series and how you can access the recordings of the previous sessions, and then also jump into our presentation on instructional supports through SIOP. So as you can see on your screen, there is a bit.ly link where you can find the recordings and the materials from each of these presentations. Within a week, the recording and the materials for this presentation will be added as well. And we hope that you're out there on social media, tweet, share on Facebook, hashtag NCLs. All right, we are going to use Webex today and also Mentimeter. So for Webex, you can see where the participant button and the chat button is. Please use that chat button to talk with us, and there will be opportunities for you to be unmuted. So feel free to type in the chat box if you want to be unmuted to respond to one of our questions. And Zetley's going to be handling all of that behind the scenes. We're also going to be using Mentimeter in order to get some responses from you. And you will see, if you haven't used Mentimeter before, the instructions on the screen. You are going to go to menti.com. You can go ahead and do that right now, menti.com. And then when we give you the numbers on the screen, we will give you the actual access codes for you to type in so that you can answer our questions. All right, so we want to start with the very first question. Who has joined us today? So first you want to go to menti.com. Zetley has put that in the chat box as well as on the screen. And you can see the code here that you need to type into Menti in order to answer our question. Who has joined us today? Zetley's training me on menti.com. So do I go to Menti at this point, Zetley, or do I wait a little while for them to see this number?
I can enter the number in the chat, so you can go to the Menti poll. So let me just type the number.
There we go. So who has joined us today so far? ESL is winning. Content teachers, yay. Shout out to the one content teacher who has responded already. Thank you for being here, everybody. But we really get excited when our content teachers join us. Oh, we have another. The ESL number is growing larger and larger. We have been challenging all of our ESL teachers in our presentations, at least if I'm involved. I've been challenging you for every presentation like this that you sign up for. Bring one of your content area colleagues along with you, or bring a school administrator or someone else that you think could benefit from this information. You know that this information will be available for you to take back to your school or your district, but it's even more exciting if you can bring someone along with you to experience it with you. Woo, we just doubled on content and other. All right. And we have an administrator. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We doubled on our administrators too. Very nice. I'll give you a few more seconds for people to let us know who has joined us today. Oh, administrators just outran our content teachers and our other.
And if you want to share in the chat, I will let Ivana know that we have some comments there. Those that selected other, feel free to add in the chat and we will read it aloud.
Fantastic. Just a few more seconds. I know I get so excited over these little bars. All right, I don't see anything in the chat box yet, so we're going to go on to our next question. Welcome, everybody. Oh, 7th grade math. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. So take a second to study this map of the state of North Carolina and figure out where you are located. You can look at the district number, but also make sure you're aware of what your area is called. So for example, today I am in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So I'm in Orange County, which is North Central or District 3, because the next question is going to ask you where you are. So we're going to go to the next question. You are still in Mentimeter and you have a new code. Where are you? So my answer would be North Central. I'm going to scroll back 1 second in case you didn't catch the name of the area.
And I can share, Ivana, I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, so my answer would be North Central as well.
And I'm not sure if the boxes I have on my screen are in any way impeding the view of the map. So if it is, somebody let me know and I will close them. But we are going to go ahead and look at your answers that are coming in on poll 2. Sally has been putting them in the chat box. I get real excited when the colors change and grow. All right. Percentages keep changing. We'll give it just another few seconds. We're pretty even for a little while. North Central and Northeast has gone to almost 50%. Northwest is fighting back. Oh, sorry. All right, so it's a little more than 25% in the North Central and a little less in Northwest, but we actually have a pretty balanced group of attendees from across the state. So we're excited to have you all here from all over North Carolina. Our next question is, what grade level do you teach? And please select all that apply. You have a new code. Now let's put that in the chat box as well. I'm gonna go watch the pretty colors. If you answered other, go ahead and put it in the chat box. So we have a pretty diverse group here today as well. A few more seconds. While we're waiting those few more seconds, I will let you know, have your fingers nimble and ready. There are going to be lots of times we're going to ask you to type in the chat box. There'll be a few times where we ask if you're interested in speaking to raise your hand so Zatley can unmute you. If we are able to work out our logistics, there'll be one time where we do unmute everybody for a quick second and then mute you back. So we're going to try to keep you excited and interactive here this afternoon. So we have 8% of others. Again, feel free to type in the chat box if you are an other. And then the percentages, you should be able to pick more than one. So we might have greater than 100%. All right, and I think we have one more, which is really important to me as a presenter to know. How familiar are you with SIOP? Are you very familiar, somewhat familiar, or you don't have a clue what SIOP means? I did this live one time many, many years ago when SIOP was newer, and someone said, I thought it was a car. So Scion was a car, but not SIOP. So you've got a new code, and let's see how much you know about SIOP. I'm learning not to talk too soon. Okay, we've slowed down now. tied at 41% with very familiar and somewhat familiar. So that's good statistical significance of 82% that are quite familiar, now 84, and 16% not familiar at all. So those of you who are not familiar at all, please don't be shy about asking questions. We might not be able to answer all of them during this really quick presentation, but if we know what your questions are, then we know what to bring back to you in a future presentation. Those of you that are very familiar and somewhat familiar, I'm excited to hear what you end up getting out of this presentation because you'll have the chance to share that with us in a quick evaluation. All right, I'm going to head back over to the PowerPoint. As I said earlier, the presentation will be available on the website as well as the archive of this presentation because we've remembered to record it. So today we are going to talk about making content comprehensible. Sometimes when people hear SIOP, they think, oh, that's old, that's gone, that's past, that's only for English learners. And we don't want you to think of those things. So we took the second half of the title, making content comprehensible, not just for English learners, but for all learners, because everything we do works for all of our students. So if I could see you all, I would ask you to raise your hands, but you can still raise your hand virtually if you can find your control panel. Raise your hand first if English is your first language. Raise your hand, your electronic hand. Now, as you're raising that electronic hand, if English isn't your first language, but you're pretty darn good at it, which I'm guessing you have to be if you're teaching in the United States, raise your hand for that as well. Zachary, are we seeing just about everybody's hands up?
I see hands up, but not a lot of participants. Remember, the little electronic hand is next to your name. Maybe some of our participants are locating this tool, but I see more hands coming up. Yes.
Fantastic. So I can't see all of you, but I am seeing some hands. And again, my assumption is that if you are teaching here in the United States, your English is pretty darn good. You've been through school. I'm going to put up 3 sentences in English. These sentences are for you to take a quick look at. And Zachary, if you're able to take all the hands down, or if everyone would just take their own hands down, I want you to look at these sentences. And when you can restate these sentences in your own words, I want you to raise your hand. I wonder if I can take them all down. Still seeing a lot of hands. Are you able to put all the hands down, Sally? Or do I have to do that?
I think you have the option, Ivana.
Okay, I think I did it. So, 3
Yes.
sentences, get ready, raise your hand as soon as you can restate them in your own words, and go. I'm seeing some hands. I'm seeing some hands. Sally, I want you to be ready to unmute Amanda Cannon just in case she's really got her hand up. Don't do it yet. Kim Meza also has a hand up. You can find them. Looks like Oliver Ham has a hand up. Bonnie Jordan. If you don't mean to have your hand up, put them down quick. All right, so I'm seeing some hands go up. I'm hoping that Amanda is okay to be unmuted.
Okay.
Are you able to unmute Amanda? Amanda, can you tell us what this means?
Amanda is unmuted.
I can.
Tell us, Amanda.
All right. So the author's book was rather Sesquipedalian, clinching the peace before the end of the volation, nonplussed to say the least.
So what does it mean?
I'll say so. The author's book was rather lengthy, finishing the piece before the end of the flight uh, hindered us to say the least.
What was the word?
Hindered.
All right, everybody give her a clap for being willing to step out in this virtual world. Now, let's see some more hands up. Tell me, do you think she was correct? And keep her unmuted because I'm going to ask some more questions for her since it's hard to unmute everybody. Amanda, my first question for you is, have you seen this before?
I have.
Is that cheating?
Not to me.
Why not?
Because I was successful at knowing kind of what everything was, but I still didn't have a definition for nonplussed.
Okay, but you were brave and you stepped out there and you took a risk, even though you didn't know all the answers.
Uh-huh.
Nice work. And kind of mute yourself, but I'm going to ask you some more questions in just a second.
Okay.
Oliver Ham had his hand up as well. Can you unmute Oliver?
Oliver, okay. He's
Oliver, can
unmuted.
you hear us?
Yes, ma'am.
So Oliver, do you agree with what Amanda's explanation of the sentences was?
Sort of. I think Siska, English is not my first language, so I can't say that word, but I think that means wordy. So understanding, or clinching the piece before the end of the volation, nonplussed. Nonplussed means I don't really know, to say the least. So maybe the person was reading a mystery novel and try to understand, to get the mystery or the murderer before the end of the book was almost impossible because of the wordiness of the book.
So
Or
yes,
understanding the sentence because of all of the words was very hard or
right.
difficult.
Using all sorts of strategies. I can hear you pulling in word parts. I can hear you pulling in previous experience with reading. Go ahead and mute yourself, so it just might come back to you. So some of the others of you might not have put your hand up. You might not have stood up if we were in a face-to-face environment. Sometimes people know all but one word, but they're not like Amanda and they don't stand up. And that can be for lots of different reasons. But let me show you the answer that we chose for that. So surprised is the non-plus definition that we use. And all of these words are English, but many of us don't know them. I'm going to ask someone who didn't raise their hand, or just all of you, to type in the chat box, how many of those words were you unsure of? How many of those words were you unsure of? And type into the box, which words did you not know? Let me go back. Which words were you unsure of? Okay, one word, and type in what that word was. Someone said, I think I need to take another ESL class. 3 words, yep. Yep, nonplussed was definitely one people struggled with. Sesquipedalian, volition, I can't even say it now. Sesquipedalian, volition. All right, so we did this to you on
Sesquipedalian.
purpose. There, thanks. So we did this to you on purpose, right? Because an English learner needs to know approximately 95% of the words on the page to understand the content. And even though you all speak English at a pretty high level, and I said 3 sentences and it was only 2, you still struggled with this. But the question becomes, whose fault was that? And I would say mine, because I'm here guiding you and leading you, and my purpose is to try to set you up for success, but I didn't necessarily set you all up for success. Now, Amanda used resources that she had. She'd seen it before, and she was proud. She was confident that she could at least do some of it, and she stepped out. And Oliver said, hey, English isn't my first language, but I can take all these different context clues and all these different learnings and try to put them together. But we know that all of our students don't do that, or they've not been taught that, or they're not ready to do that. So I'm going to show you some ways that we can actually prepare you to be successful. And here's the words that most of you said you struggled with. So even though I can't see you, I'm going to trust that you're going to work with me here. And I want you to say out loud, even though you're muted, I want you to say defenestrate. Defenestrate. When you say defenestrate, do this action, but find a window, because defenestrate actually means to throw out the window. So when I do this, you say defenestrate. When I say what does it mean, you say throw out the window. So defenestrate. What does it mean? Throw out the window. Try it one more time. Defenestrate. Throw out the window. The next one is echinated. So you could do this with me. Echinated means pointy. So when I do this, you say echinated. What does it mean? Pointy. When I do this, you say defenestrate. Defenestrate. What does it mean? Throw it out the window. What does it mean? Echinated.
Boards are wrapped around.
Somebody's unmuted. Echinated. Oh, I see what you're doing. Echinated means pointy. The last one is purchase. You can't see me grabbing my light. Purchase, as in to grab. So when I do this, you say, purchase. Does it mean to grab? When I do this, you say, does it mean throw it out the window? This, echinated.
Pointy hand.
It means pointy. Great. And finally, this, purchase. So I'm going to put a few more sentences up, and when you can tell me what it means, please raise your hand as soon as you can put it in your own words. I've cleared the hands. Looking for hands. I'm seeing hands. Seeing a few more than last time. There's some more. Somebody wanted me to cheat. Okay, show the pictures again. It's not cheating, but I can't do them all right now. Okay, I'm seeing some hands. How about Bonnie Jordan? Can you unmute Bonnie Jordan and let her tell us what it means? Bonnie?
Yes.
What
Can
do
you
you
hear
think it
me?
means? Yes.
I've been having technical difficulty with this.
Me too. So what does it mean?
Defenestrated.
Can you just read what it says and change the words for us?
Okay, so when the light suddenly went out, I purchased the nearest thing, an enchanted vine or enchanted vine, such
Echinated.
a echinated vine, such was my distress that I immediately defenestrated the plant. So, in my opinion, the defenestrated word means that they threw it out the window or got rid of it.
Okay. So can you read it from the beginning and just replace the words so when you get to purchase, change what it says?
Oh, okay. So when the light suddenly went out, I grabbed the nearest thing and I guess echinated prickly vine. Such was my distress that I immediately threw the plant.
Through the plants. Where?
I threw it out the window.
Yes, you had it. Great. Thank you. Thank you. I know it's kind of hard. And I loved it. For echinated, she didn't go with pointy. She went with prickly. Is that still okay? Yes. She expanded all of our vocabulary by doing that. And with defenestrated the plant, she had to do some interesting things with grammar. I threw the plant out the window, defenestrated the plant. Now, I'm going to put your hands down again, and I want you to raise your hand if you tell me how many of you got this much quicker than you did the first time. Just raise your hand if you got it quicker than you did it the first time. Way to tell it, Bonnie. I love it. Way to tell it, Bonnie. Okay, hands up if you got it faster this time than you did with the first one that we went through. And then I want you to type in the chat box why. What did I do that helped you? What did I do that helped you? And someone asked me to show the pictures again, so I'm going to do that while you're typing. What did I do that helped you? We pre-taught the vocabulary. We used visuals. We did the gestures. We included definitions. We front-loaded the words. We demonstrated. We modeled. We repeated simple words, added motions. Hope you were repeating as well. So if you think about how many times we said defenestrate, if you said it with me every time, you had a lot of chance to practice and to model. Now, my next question is, how much longer did it take us to do the second exercise than it did the first exercise? Was it much longer to pre-teach the vocabulary, especially when you take into consideration the level of success that you had with the activity? I'm seeing some no's. Some people said it took longer, but what about in the long run? If you teach something and the students don't get it and you have to reteach it, does that take longer than actually taking time to prepare the students ahead of time? Someone said it was about the same time. So when we talk about supporting our students and helping prepare them to be successful, it might take a little bit more time at the beginning than it does if you actually just run and go through it, but you're not necessarily seeing that success. All right, so here it is again, the answer. And if we didn't have to keep unmuting and take time, we would do a lot more conversation, but thank you for participating with that, at least with your hands and your comments in the chat. So what we are going to talk about is SIOP. And here's another chance where I ask, what does SIOP mean? And inadvertently, someone will say sheltered instruction observation protocol, and someone else will say they cheated, they read it on the slide. And just like we said with Amanda, it's not cheating, it's using your resources. And if you get nothing else out of this presentation, for our English learners, having those resources and teaching them how to use them is so important. There are people that will see the answer right here and not speak up because they think they're cheating, or they won't even notice that it's on the slide. So teach your students how to use their resources. If they've got things hanging on the walls, if you've got their own notebooks, teach them how to use those resources. All right, there are handouts. I think Zatley's going to put the link in the chat for you. If you want to use the handouts, I put everything in the PowerPoint, so you don't have to have the handouts. But the handouts, when you first open them, they might look a little messy because of the way they show up in Word. But when you open them in Google, the messiness should actually go away. And so the handouts are here for you to have, to use throughout this presentation, but also to use on your own. And if you don't mind pulling up the handout, this second page is going to be part of what we're going to work on in just a second. So the link is in the chat box for the handouts, and this little icon will be on the slides where the handouts can support you. That's because Ivanna's ADHD and can't remember where the handouts connect to her PowerPoint. So it's a great strategy too for the participants to know, even if I don't mention, hey, go look at your handout. So again, everything should be available in the PowerPoint slide if you don't have access to the handouts right now. Now, something else that you have that I'd like you to write down the bit.ly if you don't want to toggle to it right now. If we were face-to-face, I would give you a bright colored piece of paper with these 4 quadrants on it, and I would ask you to use it throughout the entire presentation because you forget things at the end. So what did you come here expecting? What did you actually get? What did you really like, and what did you suggest? So if you have some preconceptions of what this is going to be about, you could write that down now, and you can do this at bit.ly SIOP Tell Me, and there's a column for each of the areas for this ticket out. As we're going through the presentation, if you really like something or you really think I could do something differently, go ahead and put that in there as well. And then at the end, we'll bring it back up. And if we have time, we'll actually look at some of it before we go. But this is a power-packed and quick presentation. We have 1 hour left to really cover a lot of material. So in order to make sure we're really ready, I do that all the time. Things are in the slides. All right, so we're going to take a pretest. And if I could see your faces, I'd see you going, you got to be kidding me. It is 4 o'clock on Monday and you're going to give me a pretest? But then I could say to you, oops, I mean, we're a checklist. We're just going to look at a checklist and everybody's shoulders will drop and people will breathe and you'll hear sighs. And guess what? That's something to think about with your students too. If you want to know what your students know and you tell them they're going to have a test and they get all tense, they forget half of what they knew. But if you say, we're going to do a checklist and see what you know now and see where we need to go, there's a relaxation and a feeling of working together. So just something as simple as the semantics of a checklist versus a pretest can be really helpful. If you have the handout, I'd like you to write these 3 things. If you don't have the handout, my next 2 slides have these topics, the 8 components and the 30 features of SIOP. If you don't have the handout, what I want you to do is just jot down some of the things you already do and some of the things you might be able to improve on, or a question mark about something that you don't know what it means. So a check mark, what do you already do? A circle, what could you improve on to help better meet the needs of your Ls? And a question mark if you don't know what it means. If you have the handout, take a look at it. If you have this, you are not having eye problems. This is the best I could do blowing this particular thing up. So I'm going to be quiet. I'll give you about a minute on this slide. I know it's too quick. And then I'll switch to the next slide for another minute. Kind of speed read and do some marks. Again, check if you do it well. Circle it if you have maybe ways you could improve, and question if you don't know what it means. I know you're probably not finished. Take just a few more seconds to wrap up what you're thinking about. And while you're wrapping up, I'd like you to type a few things in the chat box that you checked, things that you're already doing well. You can just be real shorthand. You don't have to type the whole thing out. What are you doing well? When we are together face to face, I walk around the room and kind of look at what people are checking and circling, and I can really get a quick idea of the whole group. Some things people are doing well, relating content to students' lives, reading all the math problems aloud and discussing vocabulary. Great, keep coming with that. So live, it's a lot easier for me as the instructor to see kind of what the trends are in the room. There are not a whole lot of surprises sometimes of what people really don't know much about or would like to improve on and what they're already doing well. So I miss that. So the more you type in the chat box, the more I'll be able to sort of tailor the rest of the I'm going to go ahead, give you a few more seconds. Frequent opportunities for interaction and discussion. Great, so someone's already moved on to the next one. Thank you. Circle, what did you circle? I want to refresh my best practices. I want to be adept with all the features of SIOP. What did you circle? What is something that you or the teachers you work with could do better? Linking concepts to background, that can be a struggle. Absolutely. Absolutely. A few more. And you can also go ahead if you start your response with a question mark. If there's anything you didn't know what it meant. In context, all levels of language proficiency, yes, absolutely. Differentiating, scaffolding, and that's in the, not just with English learners. Language proficiency varies across all of our students. Academic language is another language for all of our students. Anybody have any question marks they want to put in there? Something you didn't really know what it meant? Fantastic responses. If something comes up, okay, helping instructional staff understand SIOP, comprehensible input and strategies. Great. So often I can just walk in the room and I say, I know what you're thinking. You are thinking that SIOP is just good teaching. And you're right. SIOP is good teaching, but it's good teaching plus language, purposeful teaching of language that helps our students understand the content. And like we said earlier, these strategies help everybody, not just our English language learners. So always remember, SIOP is good teaching. When someone says, I do this already, like, you know what? I bet you do. I bet you do a lot of this already. Tell me how your English language learners are doing in your class. Are you an MTSS? Are you hitting 80% with all of your English learners? Well, no. That's because you're using good teaching practices, but maybe you don't know or you're not purposefully using the skills that we need to use for language to help them understand. So even if someone thinks they're doing it all already, that's awesome, because if they're already doing it, then all we have to do is tweak it just a little bit to make it more successful for English learners. But if there are things that someone hasn't thought of or isn't doing, SIOP is so powerful. So the SIOP model components, many of you are familiar with them. We have 8 components and 30 features. Now, once again, this is where I need to know you're with me, because this is kind of hard to do on camera all by myself. So raise your hand if you have heard of or know the SIOP Macarena. I should hear some people, look, some people excited. Was probably Zally. The SIOP Macarena is awesome. Was that Zally? Yep, the SIOP Macarena. Good, I see some hands. Bonnie, I expect you to be doing it with me. There are several versions of the SIOP Macarena out and about that you may have seen. But we love the SIOP Macarena because it just kind of helps you have a little bit of fun and get moving on a Monday afternoon. But it also helps you think about the components of SIOP. So I'm going to go through it first by myself once, and then I'm going to talk you through it and hope that you do it with me. All right, so you can look at the components on the screen. First, we start with lesson preparation, and like the Macarena, building background information, comprehensible input, stir in strategies, meaningful interaction, practice and application, lesson delivery, review and assessment height. All right, I did it really slowly, and I hope some of you are doing this with me. Like, take a selfie and send it to me later. Let's try it one more time. First, we start with lesson preparation, building background information, comprehensible input, in strategies, meaningful interaction, practice and application, lesson delivery, review, and assessment. Hey, the idea is, just like we did in the introduction, is we're putting motions and music and movement to everything. So we're lesson preparing. We're building our background. We got that Macarena, but you can't see my hands, but they're hitting my background. The comprehensible input, we're getting things into their brains. We're hooking into their brains in multiple different ways. And then we're stirring in those strategies. The interaction, how are the kids working with each other? We're kind of shaking hands. Practice and application, you got to be safe. You're practicing your weightlifting in a safe environment, and then you go out and compete. That's your interaction. The lesson delivery is like delivering a pizza. Review is stepping back, because you need to step back and look at what you've done, and then you need to bring it all together in assessment. Good, somebody loves it. Woohoo! Okay, somebody's seen Zatley do it before. Awesome. So again, if you were stuck with me in a room live, you would all be helping me out with this, and we would have a good time with it, and you would see me in the street someday, and you would start doing it. All right, so on this slide, you see SIOP with WIDA. WIDA are our standards, and SIOP works beautifully with WIDA. We always want to remind everybody that WIDA is the language of math, language of science, language of social studies, and social and instructional language. And that's what we're talking about with SIOP, the language that the student needs to access the math content or the other content areas. We always want to throw that in there to remind people about WIDA. Now, this is going to be the chance where you all get to shout out at the same time. I can tell Zatley is already getting that button worked out for unmuting and muting. I want you to take just a few seconds and look at these different aspects of second language acquisition. And then I'm going to ask you, of all of these features of second language acquisition, which one do you personally have the most control over? So I'm going to give you a few seconds to read through these. I'm going to be quiet and think about which one. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to count to 3. And when I get to 2.5, Zatley's going to unmute you all. And I want you to just shout out, which of these things do you have the most control over? All right, everybody ready? 1, 2, 3.
Quality of instruction.
Give instruction.
Right, thank you. Mute them back. So I think I heard everybody pretty much saying the same thing. Sometimes we get things like motivation, and someone may have said motivation. And we definitely, from the extrinsic way, have the opportunity to motivate our students to want to learn. But research shows there's got to be that intrinsic motivation to be really that powerful. And what I heard most people say was quality of instruction. Okay, good. If one person typed motivation, I'm seeing several quality of instruction. Quality of instruction is actually the one piece that you have the most control over. You can help with motivation. You might be able to help with the access to the language. There are different things you can help with, but when it comes to where your power lies, it's in that quality of instruction, knowing how to work with second language acquisition. And that's what SIOP helps us do. Now, some people don't know what language, language distance means. And so I always like to just share with you. So English is my native language. I started learning Chinese in college. When you look at English and you look at Chinese, they're very, very different in many, many ways. So there's a large distance between the languages. When I start learning Spanish, here's English, here's Spanish. There's a difference, but there's a lot of cognates, there's a lot of similarities. So the language difference is closer. So which do you think, if a student comes from a Spanish-speaking country or a Chinese-speaking country, if all other things were equal, just the difference was in the language, which student would learn English quicker? All other things equal. Type in, would it be Chinese or Spanish? Who would probably learn English quicker? Everything equal except for the native language. Yes, the Spanish-speaking student, because the language distance is closer. So that's something to think about. Now, if the student comes in with different levels of education, there's going to be a difference. But all things equal, language distance is important. All right, finally, we're getting to the 8 components of SIOP and preparation. What makes SIOP? SIOP is language objectives. And you know, we've been doing this for over 20 years now, so people aren't as shocked by it as they were when we started. But when we look at our content objectives, which if we were together, I would ask you to shout these out and read them to me. But instead, I'm going to be quiet for a second, let you read them to yourself. You can see we're looking at it's better than good teaching, and we're looking at face-to-face and remote ways that you can incorporate it. We want to tie a language objective to each of these. So we're going to compare and contrast. Again, if we were face-to-face, we'd have more opportunity for you to talk to each other and talk to us. So some of that's going to be happening more with me. But you have the opportunity to write notes about how you can incorporate this into your lesson planning, both face-to-face and online. And we'll come back at the end and check on this. But the language objectives are what make SIOP SIOP. And when we use language objectives, I don't know about you, but back in my day when I was in the classroom, we were required to write our objectives on the board, 2.1, whatever, and write it out. And it didn't mean anything to the students. These objectives are to be read by the students. They're written for the students, so the students really understand what is it you want me to learn and do today. It should be easy to understand. It should be oral and written because we want those multiple places to tag on. And I know this sounds like a no-brainer, but it should be related to the tasks necessary to master the content objective. You'd be surprised how many times they don't. So what language do I need to use to accomplish my content objective? And some people say, well, how do you do that with kindergartners? Well, here's a beautiful example of how you can do it with kindergartners. You've got the required piece over here on the left, and then you use pictures in order to help the students know what they're going to be doing in the different content areas. So think about online. If you're online, how can you use your content and language objectives? What can you do with that? I had a teacher in a high school that all their students had a notebook and they wrote the objective. It was on the board. They wrote the objective in the notebook. As the class went on, they would write some things down. And at the end, when they would debrief, did we do this or not? Yes, check. How do you know we did it? Write it down. So that would be something in this virtual environment that would be a Google Doc. You could have the whole class doing it together, or each person could have their own Google Doc. If you can think of other ways that you might work with content and language objectives, or even just your lesson planning virtually or other things in class, type them in the chat box. We're not going to stop right now to go through those, but we will pull those together so that we can share them with you as we go on. So please take a second to type any ideas in the chat box. So language objectives are what make SIOP SIOP. Someone mentioned earlier that building background can be a little hard. And it can be, especially if you don't know the backgrounds of your students or if your students have many different backgrounds. So again, tying some things together. When we're doing building background, we want to link. Everybody hold your hands up and make a link like a chain. We're going to link the concepts to their background experiences. We got to give them something to hold on to. And then we want to bridge to the past concepts that they've learned. So we're linking to experiences, we're bridging to concepts, and what many people think about is key vocabulary. And key vocabulary is very important, but it's not the only thing. We're going to go through just a few examples of building background. So I'm going to tell you that Sejong is a well-known daewang in Korea, and every Korean school child knows about him. Type in the chat box, what's a daewang? I've given you context clues. I've given you some information. What's a daewang? If you're Korean, you'll know the answer, and you tell me I'm not using it exactly correctly, but that's okay. Leader, instructor, every Korean school child knows about him. Teacher, religious leader. So I'm going to tap into some background knowledge that I think you may have. Henry VIII is a well-known daewang in England. Every British school child knows about him. What's a daewang? King. Immediately you got it. How hard was that for me to tie into your background? I figured I had about a 98% chance of getting king out of you right away with that. So I don't have to spend a lot of time teaching about daewang. I just connected it immediately to your past knowledge. Very quick. Another thing to think about are the multiple meanings. What subject area might you find these words used differently in? We have cycle and table. Type it in the chat box. What content area might you find these used differently? So often when we know that a word has multiple meanings, we try to protect our students instead of teaching them the multiple meanings and empowering them. Someone said science and math. Here's an example of science. So when a student understands that a word has multiple meanings, you've actually empowered them. When they walk in the math class and you say table, they're not looking for that thing that they're sitting at. Here's one of my favorites. Type in the chat box. Is this a math problem or an English problem? Math problem or English problem? I see math, both. English, I see another both. Those of you that have got both, kudos. Yes, this is a math problem. Each of them are math problems, but they are English problems. I think we have a math teacher with us today. How many native speakers of English get these problems wrong because of these little tiny connector words into and by? It's so important that we focus on the little pieces of the language and help our students connect. One more quick one with math. How many different ways can you say these different symbols? If we were together, I would have each part of the room divided into a different group. How many things can you think of? Plus, add, also. So here's some examples of how you might fill this out. Now, once again, I don't know if you noticed that little calculator went away and we got goes into. 6 goes into 12 2 times. Now, if we were live, face to face, some of you would be laughing. Some of you would still be going, huh? But then I know you're with me, right? But it's also important to realize that a student not only needs to hear, they need to write, they need to see. If a student has only heard you say 6 goes into 12 2 times and they get to a test and it says goes into, they may not connect the dots. So it's really important to think about our language. All right, here's another kind of no-brainer. If you're going to create a word wall, use it. Use it creatively. Use it effectively. Get the students involved with the word wall. But sometimes people create a word wall because their principal told them to, and they never do anything with it. So here's one example. Color code. Color code the words. Make sure the students are looking at them. If it's a polysemous word, mark both of the colors. Polysemous, multi-meaning. This is one of my favorites. It doesn't look like much just looking at the picture. They have a picture. Each student or group of students is responsible for researching that particular thing. Let's say outer core. They color it. This is a middle school, by the way. They color it, they write information and they glue it on the back of it, and then they put it up on the wall. Every time the teacher or the students talk about these things, they look at the wall and they talk about what's there. Little by little, the teacher takes them away as she believes that the students have the concept. Come time for the test, the wall is blank. Where do the students look when they're trying to remember answers? Type it in the chat box. Where do the students look when they're trying to remember the answers? They look on the word wall because they created the word wall. They interacted with the word wall. The word wall became a part of them. It was burnt into their memory. They looked up there and they saw it's that word right over the door, mantle, and they got it right on the test. Fascinating and fantastic way to use a word wall. Looking at things like Spanish and looking at all the different word parts. This was actually in a hallway in one of our schools. All right, so I want you to think about other ways you could use word walls. Think about our digital word. I put our calculator here to remember goes into. We might have time. If someone wants to type in some other ways, precious brain, yes. Had content objectives at the top as well as daily breakdown of what we're doing in class. Yes, great. So what are ways electronically that you can create vocabulary practices or word walls? There's so many out there. I want to hear a couple of your ideas, and then I think Zoutley's going to share one with us on the next slide. Type in the chat box. Students look up pictures to add to the word wall. Absolutely. Visual dictionaries on Word docs. Maybe one or two more. And if you've got something that's just absolutely to die for that you can explain in less than 30 seconds, you can ask to be unmuted. But Add the words learned on another chart for students to look at it at the end and reuse them. Circle those they don't know. Digital vocabulary, comparing Spanish and English, pictures beside them, the Frere model. Assign words to students and they do short Flipgrid videos on them. That's a cool one. Well, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Bitmoji classroom and the rage that it has become. Zally, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Okay, I'm the Bitmoji queen.
She did a SIOP presentation nationally, so she calls me the queen, but she's right up there.
So Bitmoji is just a visual app. You create your avatar, and it has been used in education mainly this year that we have had to create our own virtual classrooms, and teachers wanted to be as close as the real classroom as they could, but also offer different resources to students and parents. So this is just an example of what a teacher, I think this is social studies that we selected. And they created these, and there's multimedia everywhere. When we talk about text sets and you have a content objective and you want to be able to provide comprehensible input to your students, then you have all these texts and you have images and you have audio and video, and then you can create all that. You can start reviewing the content the students already know, building background. You can provide all these, and then how you can make content comprehensible for your students. So we love this. And this sample, if you want to talk about this specific resource, Ivana, that is embedded in the Bitmoji class.
Yeah, I was trying to get back to the Bitmoji, but that thing keeps jumping down. So this is a great way to be able to provide for your students. You can see it's in a Google Doc, and it has the information, picture examples, it has the words, it has pronunciations, and I'm trying to get like out of it to go back to your screen, but we'll just go back to this screen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the beauty of this is that when you are offering choices, you know that we are creating choice boards. This is sort of one of those samples because you provide something for every child in your group, in your classroom. If you have those kids that they learn more if they watch a video, if they connect the text with images, if they prefer to go back and listen to the story, or maybe if you record, some of the teachers, what they're doing is they're recording their voice so the kids can go back and do it. They have embedded some resources, translation, like Google Classroom, Microsoft, the Immersive Reader, all these different digital tools that help students access all the content. And now that we are working in collaboration with parents at home, then when they see this information and it's displayed in such an easy visual way, they feel like, oh, okay, I can help my kid and I can follow this path that the teacher offer, and maybe we want to explore something different, they also can do it. So I will put a couple of hashtags in the chat, because if you go there, you will see there are educators sharing all what they are creating, different content areas. There are a lot of ESL teachers, educators in dual language programs. So it's not just Spanish. We have plenty of different languages, and you can use those resources to support all these other kids with different first language. So yeah, I love this. So thank you, Ivana.
yep, it's a lot of fun, and it is well worth it. Someone asked about the content or this PowerPoint. It will be archived on our website, just like all of the presentations from this fall series, and we'll have all that information again at the end of the point. All right, so we are going to fly through these. We know that this is like really good all day training, but we want to just throw some things at you that you can grab what works for you and go ahead and take it into your classroom. So having a clear explanation of academic tasks is so important. So what I'm going to ask you to do in a second is just raise your hand and tell me that with this explanation, with these instructions, do you feel you could be successful with this particular experiment? To see condensation in action, put a large, at least 8.5 by 11 piece of cardboard, a book will do, in the freezer for about an hour. Now take the boiling kettle of water and hold the cold book above 1 foot above the spout, right in the steam where oven mitts, water droplets will form on the book. That's condensation. So raise your hand if you feel like you could do this experiment. I'm not seeing a lot of hands. So type in the chat box, what could have made that better for you as a student? And we'll do take two. Uh-oh, I did it again. Visuals, what else? Seeing the text, face-to-face, yep, written instructions, slower speech, so all numbered steps, all these things. So for our step two, people say, well, write it down. So here it is in writing. And you guys have already gone on to a number of other things that would help us. So in take two, we've written it down, but even writing it down the way it is doesn't help that much. So by the time we get to take three, we've taken your advice, we've added pictures, we've put it into steps, and we've actually made it a little more logical, like boil water in a kettle, because they went straight to having the water boiling in the kettle. And I don't know, some people don't know kettle. If I see the picture, I know what it is. But if you just say kettle, I might call it a teapot or something different. So really connecting it, putting things in order, putting them in writing, adding the pictures, you'd be surprised. Even with SIOP trained teachers, many times we forget. We're in a hurry. We want to give explanations and instructions and we move on. And modeling, of course, would be very helpful. You can model one step at a time. You could model the whole thing and then send the students out on their own. But really thinking about how you give instructions is just one small piece of comprehensible input. So we want you to think about comprehensible input will help students to understand. And in that one example, you have a number of things: writing, pictures, modeling, and that can go into any content area or any task. So just one small piece of comprehensible input. Then we go to strategies. Now, when SIOP talks about strategies, they're talking about strategies that students use, strategies that we can teach our students to help them own their own language growth. So things like predicting and inferring, or evaluating, or summarizing, or visualizing. Some adults have trouble visualizing. Helping a student learn how to visualize what they're reading or what you're talking about to really see it. So teaching our students to think about thinking. Also moving into active learning. Now, I love this example of highlighting. If you say, let your students highlight, what are they going to highlight? Anybody want to type in the chat box? What's a student going to highlight? If we were together, the whole group would yell out, yes, everything. If you give a student a highlighter, they're going to highlight everything. So it's a huge skill to teach a child, are you looking for vocabulary? Are you looking for a main idea? What do you highlight? Another thing that's really powerful for our English learners is mnemonics. I'm going to breathe for 1 second and let you type a mnemonic in if you know one. Not seeing one yet. TPR. Okay, that's an abbreviation. PEMDOS. Ooh, I don't know that one. Type what that one means. Usually I get things like Roy G. Biv, slant. Ooh, I don't know that one either. You guys are great. You're going to teach me some new mnemonics. One thing you can do with a student whose English is not their first language is have them make mnemonics using their own language. You can tie things together to their own language. So in Japanese, when you say thank you and someone responds back, oh, it's no problem, I had trouble remembering it. So I just remembered, don't touch my mustache. Doshi toshi mushite. Like, oh, don't worry about it, no problem. But I couldn't remember it. So don't touch my mustache was my language. It was close and it helped me connect it. So just some things to think about there. Also, our social effective strategies. Again, these are things for our students to learn how to regulate their own learning. Yes, we're involved with them, and social emotional learning is so important right now. And when we get into cooperative learning, we get into the next part, which is interaction. So we have student strategies, we have teacher strategies, but SIOP really wants you to focus on student strategies because we're always thinking about our teacher strategies, and that really gets into interaction. So on your handout, you have the explanation of the jigsaw activity, the think, pair, share activity, and the numbers heads activity. Those are 3 interactions that we feel are very, very valuable for English learners, whether it's an English learner self-contained kind of classroom like a pullout, or whether you have English learners within a larger group. You can strategically put students into groups. For example, with numbered heads together, I might have a really talkative person, a really shy person, a person that's an EL, all in one group to learn this piece of information so that those that normally don't speak or aren't so comfortable, when they go into the bigger group where there's a 1, 2, 3, and 4, they have that confidence because they've practiced. So these 3 strategies are very powerful for our students to help them have a chance to hear, to talk about, to practice before they're asked to actually produce in a group setting. We all know interaction is so powerful. In a typical classroom, what percentage of the time, type this in the chat box, what percentage of the time is teacher talk and what percentage of the time is student talk? Give me out of 100%, 50-50, percentage is teacher talk, what percentage is student talk? I see 50-50, 10-90, 70-30, awesome. 30% teacher, 70% student, that's close. It's about 80% teacher, 20% student. And we know it's the student that needs to learn the material and that needs to work on their language skills. So we really want to use these kind of activities and to set students up to be able to be successful using the language. So I put this slide together, strategies and interaction, because I wanted to point out again that they're different, but they're complementary. So there are teacher strategies, but we really want you to think about what strategies can you work with your students on and teach them to help them take ownership of their own language. So in this virtual environment, look, this is like 90%, 99% me talking and a little bit of you guys getting to talk. And if we had more time, we'd be able to stretch that out and do some more. So I know it's a challenge. I know it's hard. I hate standing up here and just talk, 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 talk. You see me drinking water, my throat hurts already. But really, we can think about ways to use our technology to have more interaction, to use strategies to help our students use the language more. And if someone has ideas, feel free to type it in the box. I'm going to pause for a second and give you a chance to do that. Strategies and interactions for online. Flipgrid, Jamboard. Oh, students typing a paragraph on the same Google Doc. Nearpod, embed interactive activities, Socratic discussion and taking turns, journal writing. And just like we looked at with the word wall in that particular Bitmoji, that can be used for many different interactions as well. Student teaching the lesson via webinars, debates, one student presents, then the other takes turns, challenging. Great. So lots of different things that we can do face-to-face, virtually, and hybrid. Practice and application. Practice and application. So I'm in a safe environment. I'm working on it. My teacher's helping me. I'm working with other students. But then I have to step out and do it to show what I've learned. It's not necessarily as safe of an environment. So when we're thinking about practice and application, we really want to make sure, when at all possible, before we push these students out for applying something, that we have prepared them appropriately in the practice time. And so we want to make sure that we are including listening, speaking, reading, and writing, because so often our students don't have that balance. And I know a lot of people weren't happy when Common Core came out, but Common Core really brought to the forefront listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And even as North Carolina moved away from the Common Core and rewrote our standards, that listening, speaking, reading, and writing stayed prominent. And so it actually helped us a lot, because when we're talking about English learners need, well, guess what? All students need, and all students are expected to do that. The more things that people were writing in on the previous one, writing for descriptive and expository purposes, using their learned vocabulary, using sentence starters and sentence frames. Yes, so you're supporting the students in the practice, and depending on their language proficiency, you might still have some of those supports in place when they're doing that application, like a word bank or something. Still finding what it is the student needs, but taking away those scaffolds as they no longer need them. Thank you. So practice and application, some more things that you might be able to do online. I know when my child was young and when I was in the classroom, we did a lot on computers, and that was a long time ago before the computers were so prevalent as they are now. And it really helped our students to be in a safe environment. How the computer will sometimes tell you you're wrong, but you don't get a big red X. It just kind of coaxes you into something else or gets you to try again. Or gaming. Gaming has really become popular in education now to help our students feel like they're playing a game when they're really learning and growing, and the computer is then self-adapting based on their answers. There's a lot of good things out there right now happening on the internet and in computers. Let's see if some of you have nope, nothing new yet, of ways that you can do practice and application. You might practice a debate with your students within your own face-to-face or virtual environment, but then you pair up with another classroom and you have a debate. So your practice is within your own classroom with your own students, and then that application is stepping out of that safe environment into an environment that is a little more unknown, a little more unknown. Exactly, just put the link to the ticket out in there again. So if you're thinking of things, go ahead and add them. Lesson delivery. I want to see a raise of hands. Or I think you have a green check mark and a red X. See if we can get fancy now. If you think that lesson preparation, if you have really good lesson preparation, you're going to have a really good lesson delivery. If you agree with that, give me a green check mark. If it's not always the case that really good lesson preparation equals really good lesson delivery, give me a red X. Okay, I'm seeing some X's. Yay, we found them. All right, I'm seeing several X's. You know, you guys are smarter than I was, because when I was a SIOP coach in Charlotte, I just thought, you know, if you've got an awesome lesson, of course you're going to have really awesome delivery. And I was asked to come and work with this one teacher, and they gave me some things to look for. And we sat down to do the lesson prep, the pre-coaching session. Man, that lesson plan knocked it out of the park. It was so well organized. It had great interaction. It was just put together beautifully. I'm like, how can this person not be doing a good job with a lesson plan like this? And she even talked me through it. It was clear she understood what the lesson plan was about. Like, it wasn't like she just copied it somewhere. We got into the classroom, nothing like the lesson plan. Absolutely nothing like the lesson plan. And so for me, that was like, wow, how can it be so different? I mean, I know it could be a little different, but it was two different worlds. And so we had a real interesting time figuring out where the breakdown came between the planning and then the delivery. And so we know you can have days where the fire alarm goes off and things like that happen, but really looking at lesson delivery and what can you do as the instructor to move away from that 80% teacher talk and 20% student talk? What can you do to help build the background? Your handout has more that I'm going to show in the slides, but this is one of the ones that I think is so important, is give students time to self-correct. Give students time to think. If you're learning another language, you have to triangulate. You hear it in English, you translate it into your language, you figure out your answer, you bring it back to English, you put it out of your mouth. That takes time. I want you to type in the chat box, how long does the typical teacher wait between the time they ask the question and then either move on to another student or answer it themselves? How long do they wait? I'll give you a hint. It's in seconds. Oh my gosh, Gabriella, you got it. Gabriella knocked it out. You guys are close. I think Gabriella's the only one that got it. According to research, the average teacher waits 2 seconds before they either go on to another student or they answer the question themselves and move on, because we got things to cover. Remember our activity at the beginning where you didn't have all the answers, but if I were on a time schedule, check, I taught that. Doesn't matter if you learned it, right? I taught that. Whereas if you prepare the students, if you give them think time, then you're going to get a lot greater response from your students, and they're going to have more opportunity. And there's so many ways to do that. Whiteboards are a great way. If you don't have whiteboards, or you happen to be someone that moves from class to class, sheet protectors with a piece of white paper, put a piece of tape down the side, wipe off markers, and a sock. You got a portable whiteboard, put them in a notebook. You can carry a whole classwork with you. I did that. Whiteboards are a great way. Making everybody write their answer maybe even making everybody hold up their answer, because then you can see in a way of formative assessing how much everybody knows and who's got it right and who doesn't. Or just making them write it down before they answer gives everybody a chance to think. And research also shows that the AG kids or the AIG kids, when you force them to take a little bit of time to think, even though they already knew the answer, they will typically have a deeper, better thought out answer in that short amount of time. So even if you move it from 2 seconds to 10 seconds, if we had a lot of time today, I would just be quiet for 10 seconds and you would all be going crazy thinking the computer crashed. 10 seconds feels like forever. But you can have strategies, maybe count it on your fingers, maybe hum something to yourself. Some people I know pull sticks to give people the chance to talk, but really taking time for that wait time can make a huge difference. One little thing can make a huge difference for your students. Another one that's kind of similar is the teacher always giving the answer. So instead of giving the answer, this takes a little more time, but let a student have the opportunity to do something like phone a friend, or be very strategic in your pairing of students so that students with different proficiency levels can be working together and supporting each other. Having people in pairs talk about the answer before that answer is given. Another one I like is the inside-outside circles or conga line. You can actually differentiate the two lines or the two circles and give students the chance to practice and hear something over and over before you take it into the classroom and expect them to actually answer that out loud. So the phone a friend, I really like. You got to kind of watch. Some students are always going to take that option. So there are different ways you can set it up. But those are two really important teacher behaviors that just tweaking them a little bit can help your students tremendously. So I put what and why on this slide because when you are delivering your lesson, and we've had technology for a long time now, but back when I first came out in the classroom, it was like, oh my gosh, we have technology, we have to use it. So what are you wanting to do with it? And why are you going to use it? Not just technology for technology's sake. Not just putting the EL student in the back of the classroom on the computer because they're doing something, they're busy, and you can focus on other things. So really thinking about the why for using technology. I'm going to pause again and let you type in some things that you're using in your lesson delivery, or maybe even some of the questions that you're asking about technology in lesson delivery face-to-face or online. Using music. Kelly, tell me more. Type some more. How are you using music? If you've got something awesome you want to share with everybody, Kelly or anybody else, raise your hand. Document cameras for the kindergarten students. Kelly, if you want to be unmuted, just raise your hand. Yes, type what you're using technology for as part of your lesson delivery. Uh-oh, it got going fast there. Oh, a chant is an exit ticket. Videos and reading websites. To help with memorization, allow repetition without student noticing or getting bored. Yeah, if you can be creative with repetition, that's so powerful. Let's see. Today I showed a third grade EL how to safe image search for words in his passage. There you go. If Ortilia is willing to be unmuted, I'd like to hear about the exit ticket. Flipgrid, I can't talk. Flipgrid as formative assessment. Kelly, if you don't mind.
Hi. Hi,
Yes.
Ivana.
Hey,
So
dear.
I've been using chants or a certain chant for an exit ticket for many years now, and I use it. I started using it when I taught pre-K, and I found that for English learners, it was really awesome. Also because it's repetitive, and it's the same tune that I use. However, I'm always looking for a different answer after the lesson. So we might be learning about rhyming words, and I'll say that we had a great day, we had a great day, we had a great day in ESL today. So what's one thing we learned today? And so then everybody has a turn, and then they'll say, we learned how to rhyme words. And so we'll all sing that together. And then I'll say, okay, so what words did we rhyme? And then I'll have students say can and man. And so I'll say so and so learned can and man. And then everybody sings it. And so that helps me to understand that they understood what the lesson was.
Great. Formative assessment, repetition, sticking in
Yes.
that repetition, having fun with music, hooking that into your brain with the music. Did Kelly want to be unmuted to talk about her use of music? Maybe, maybe not. And if we unmute you, if you don't mind muting yourself back. Okay, I didn't
Can you hear me?
Yes, there
Hi,
you are.
this is
Great.
Kelly.
How are you using music?
Yes, well, I'm a reading specialist at our school, and I work right now specifically working with first graders still on letter recognition and sound recognition. And you have to get really creative to not make that boring. So we've been using the Foundation's alphabet, and I've put it to a rap beat. And we do it every time I meet with these kids, and then I let them dance afterwards. And so they look forward to it, and they don't realize that we're doing the same thing every day, but they look forward to the dancing part especially. But just putting it to a beat, it makes a huge difference. So it's something simple like that.
Fantastic. Finding a way to tap into what the students enjoy. Absolutely. Finding a way to tap in. A number of different programs that are being listed. You guys should all be able to see that. Dance integration, yes. Fantastic. And you can keep typing in. We're going to go on to review and assessment. So we already talked about review, stepping back, and then assessment is really giving them the chance to show you what they know. I'll be mindful of student correction after today's lesson. I refreshed my implementation. So yay, with fidelity. It was funny you talk about correction. I was in a classroom once that was using, I don't remember what the program was, but had a lot of chants, and it was, I think it was social studies or history, and it was really like this rap beat, and it was really getting you, into what the history was and what they did and this and that, and the kids were just having a great time. And the teacher said, "Sit down, be still." Like, wait a minute. How you want me to sit down and be still when you're teaching a rap, song? And it's like sometimes we miss some of the point. And so really thinking about the correction, thinking about the wait time, thinking about the movement and how they all work together is really important. And when we think about review and assessment, it's also important to think about the different kinds of assessment. So we know we have the summative test. And sometimes when we talk about SIOP and we talk about scaffolding and meeting the student where they are and giving them all of these supports, which we already talked about might take longer in some ways, but ultimately gets the student farther along. Like, well, we've got this test they've got to take. And it goes back to that same activity. It's like, but if you just push them through and give them the test, they're not likely to succeed. But if you scaffold them, even though they might not make grade level, they're going to make growth. And so thinking about that summative test, not as your ultimate goal, but thinking about growth and how you can help the student grow toward that summative goal. Also thinking about how do you grade? Do you grade for letter grades? Do you grade a student who has a proficiency level of a 1 or 2 on WIDA without modifying the materials or giving those supports, or maybe reducing the number of questions or simplifying the language? Because the idea is not really to find out what English they know, it's to find out what content they know. Can they draw a picture? So we know that the state test can't be adapted like that, but there are a lot of summative tests that can be adapted for our English. And one of the ways to know what to adapt for a summative assessment is by going through the formative assessments. And somebody mentioned TPR earlier, total physical response. When we did defenestrate, we were doing TPR. We were using our body to express the meaning of what it was we were talking about. And again, that hooks into our brains in different ways and helps us to keep that. Um, I've run into people like 3 years later, and they'll be like, "Oh, like defenestrate, yeah, you remember that, cool." But it's because it hooks in our brains. Thumbs up, pencils up, just checking where people are. Um, what is it, fist to five? Where are you on a scale? Keep it close, only I can see it. There's lots of formative assessments, response boards we talked about already. If we had been together and when we had done our initial activity where I asked you to restate in your own words. It was a stand up, sit down activity. So it was like, stand up when you can restate it in your own words. And I bet Amanda would have still stood up, but most people won't if they don't know it all, because standing up, it just really puts you out there in front of everybody. And we wonder why our students don't answer. Like, we're not always comfortable getting up and standing up. And then the second time we do it with the defenestrate, and I say stand up, it's like dominoes. People stand up. But then there might be one person who's kind of real hesitant and stands up and they still don't know the answer, but they stand up anyway because of peer pressure. So the stand up, sit down can be a really good thing to do if you've prepared your students for success. And it's good for the brain because it gets the blood flow. So formative assessments are so important with everything we do with our students. It can help us know how to adapt classroom materials. It can help us know also if we are able to manipulate the summatives, what we can do with that. So assessments online, we got all of our pencil paper tests. We know with the access test, it's been a big discussion this year. There's not going to be a remote access test. It's already online for most of our students. But just thinking about assessments and what can we do creatively with assessments. All right, so outcome sentences. I want you to type in the chat box, pick one of these. I feel, I wonder, I think, or I learned. Type it in the chat box about this particular time we've had together, this amazingly quick, for me anyway, hour and a half. I feel, I wonder, I think, I learned. I wonder what you guys are going to take away from this. I feel validated and empowered. Wow. I feel motivated. Oh, it's going fast. I learned the 8 components of SIOP. I think this has been a great refresher of the SIOP components. I feel more confident in what makes SIOP more than good teaching. Nice. I feel like I got a lot more practical strategies than I expected, that I had hoped for. Awesome. Feel excited about the work that my team has done to incorporate SIOP into core curriculum. This session reinvigorated me. Thank you. And thank you. Refreshed, especially on comprehensible inputs. I wonder if the list of strategies or programs that teachers shared in the chat could be shared with us. We will certainly try to pull that together. How many teachers use language objectives? I feel fantastic. I spent a great time with our dear SIOP quiz. And clarify, I should read these before I start reading them out loud. The difference between strategies and interaction. I learned not to forget the little words, such as goes into, yes, versus goes into. I feel I can implement with more fidelity. All right, and it keeps going. I wonder if we could have more sessions like this. Absolutely. And as our EL support team comes back online next semester, we will be offering more. That Lee and I are both trying to get into the field a little bit more and not be stuck in the Pink Palace or at home so much, being in the field virtually and or face-to-face once we're back face-to-face again. Oh, more excited about music. Yes, we would love to do some more sessions. You would love to see what she did with Bitmojis and SIOP as well. So again, if we were face to face, we'd spend a little more time. I'd ask you to read these out. I'd ask you to tell me how we did it. But actually, in your sentences now, you just gave me some of the answers. So did we explore how the SIOP model is more than good to just good teaching? I know for at least one person we did, because they said they felt comfortable explaining that now. We have looked at incorporating the approaches and the strategies. A couple people said they feel more confident with certain aspects of the SIOP model. So I think that answers our questions. The compare and contrast, we did a little bit verbally, but we didn't do as much if we had been together. And then hopefully you wrote some notes on how you can use this. We will be posting this on the website, but I'd like if you would take a moment to just give me a little more feedback by going to bit.ly SIOP tell me. in order to just tell us, what were you expecting when you came? What did you actually get? What did you like? And what did you suggest? Because I know it's fast and furious. I know we don't have as much interaction as we'd like to have, but I hope I was able to still model some of the SIOP model in what we were doing. Wait time was killing me too. I was counting on my fingers. You know, it's really, really hard when I can't see your faces. So hopefully you've got the bit.ly. I'll come back to it. Oh, great. Exactly. Already put it in there. I did it again. I clicked on the hyperlink. So any questions? And then there are some links in the PowerPoint, the handouts again for today. There were 2 summer presentations. There was a SIOP overview, which if you enjoyed this, go back and take a look at that one. And then there was a SIOP 2020 that really dug into more online possibilities for SIOP, looking at building background, comprehensible input, and interaction. So both of those are linked there for you as summer presentations. And someone was asking about all the different ways to find us. And then if you want to track us down personally, there we are. And Sally has given you the bit.ly in the chat box for where you will find this recording and the PowerPoint. All of the PowerPoint slides have the links that we've talked about. And I really look forward to seeing what you have to say in the ticket out evaluation, because it always helps us know what to do next. Like if there's something you want, I would suggest can be something we could do differently. It could be something new that you want. But this is really important to me, and I love this ticket out. I hope you'll steal it and use it. It's very simple. And if you ask people to do it throughout the presentation, especially when it's on paper and in a bright color, you get really good feedback from the people right when they're trying to walk out the door. I would not let people leave without doing it. I would stand at the door and, you know, be like a little police officer. And I learned not to let people fold it, especially if they were high school teachers, because they would fold it and turn it in without writing on it. You know, it can be like that sometimes. But I just think it's really simple, but it gives a lot of really good feedback. Yes, you would. Thank you, Amanda. You know I would. Stand at the door. You can't leave. The link for the PowerPoint, she put that up there again. Any final comments? Anything you want to add, Lee? Any final comments from you guys? I know it was fast and furious, but I hope you got at least one thing you can walk out of here and use right away.
Thank you, Ivanna. A lot of excited participants. They say this has been great, and thank you for sharing today. Just let me know when we want to stop the recording. We have a few more minutes, but thank you very much.
I'm going to go back to the contact screens. You can see some of my fans are in the house. Thank you, Amanda. Amanda and I go way back to my SIOP years in Charlotte Meg. Well, I think we are at the point where we can stop the recording. Thank you.